Today on CityCast Chicago, immigration agents shot and injured a woman in Brighton Park over the weekend, just hours before the Trump administration announced it's officially sending the National Guard to Chicago. We're breaking down what we know so far. It's Monday, October 6th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. I'm here with executive producer Simone Alicea. We're recording this bright and early on Sunday morning because this violent escalation we're seeing from the federal government is a very big deal, my friends. Let's start with the shooting on Saturday. She was taken to the hospital in fair condition and later released. But Simone, what do we know about what happened? What's being reported so far?
Immediately, there were conflicting accounts of the shooting.
As you can imagine,
as you can imagine. Let's start with what the Department of Homeland Security is saying, what their official accounting of the shooting is. According to them, immigration agents were in a vehicle that was being, quote, boxed in by a bunch of other vehicles, and that the agents fired, quote, defensive shots. And that was when one of the women in one of those vehicles was injured. There's no independent video of this. They haven't answered any clarifying questions from reporters on this narrative. Also, in addition to that, people on the ground told a very different story. The Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, said that they got a bunch of reports that a vehicle carrying immigration agents rammed into a civilian vehicle and then started firing shots. And that's when the woman was shot. So not that the vehicle was being boxed in or that there was some kind of coordinated attack here or anything, but that they had rammed into a vehicle, then started firing. There was a woman at the scene who told the Tribune that the car that the immigration agents had run into was her son's vehicle, saying that her son, a citizen, was taken into custody. And so it is at this point that we're speaking the very unclear kind of what exactly happened. But we know that in the shooting, the fatal shooting of Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, a couple weeks ago, there was also an issue of a discrepancy between the official Homeland Security account and what we later saw in camera footage there. Immigration authorities had described an officer being dragged while Silverio drove away. Then camera footage came out with audio where the officers were talking to each other and saying that their injuries were no big deal, that nothing major was the quote from the quote there. So a discrepancy in that narrative as well. So it is that's sort of why we're talking about the conflicting accounts of this shooting as well.
Yeah, we've talked about this not only throughout the federal deployment of ICE agents, but we have to deal with a lot of police narratives in Chicago, and we are always reminding people to take those with a grain of salt and with some scrutiny, because like you said, I've watched so many videos over the weekend where the narrative that ICE is painting, that they are under attack, that they are facing hostility. Well, you are facing pushback from protesters across the city as you are kidnapping citizens across Chicago, as you're carrying out 3 a.m. raids on South Shore apartments. You're facing immense pushback where you're throwing tear gas out of your vehicles from, Humble Park to Archer Heights at any sign of nonviolent protests. That all happened early mid-morning Saturday. A few hours later, Governor J.B. Pritzker announced he received an ultimatum from the White House, who then confirmed they had authorized 300 National Guard troops to be deployed in Chicago. They sort of hit the button we always knew was on the table. But we still are kind of in the dark, Simone, about timeline.
Yeah, there's still a lot we don't know. And in fact, as you said, we have been kind of in limbo about this for the past several weeks. And in many ways, the situation hasn't really change because we still don't know when they might be deployed or where they would be deployed or what they would be doing. Let's get into sort of how this could be different from what we're seeing now, because as you've said, Chicagoans have also for the past several weeks been living under Operation Midway Blitz and all of these sort of the raids, the protests, etc. that
the river photo ops, the downtown marches
that we've been talking about. Ostensibly, Trump is sending the National Guard to protect ICE personnel and facilities. They have been calling the protests happening here riots, even though, again, it has primarily been federal agents who have escalated these confrontations. I remember when we were preparing for this and I was speaking to our colleagues in DC, where the National Guard was already, it works a little different in DC because their police, their local law enforcement is essentially under the control of the presidency because of their status as a federal district. And so their National Guard troops have legal basis to actually engage in law enforcement actions and arresting people for crimes, right? Technically, legally, that would not be the case here. And what I was hearing anyway from our colleagues in DC was that it was more of a mask for ICE to carry out its immigration arrests, its raids, right? That was sort of more almost the net effect. Everyone was focused on these guard troops in these high tourist areas that were picking up trash and whatever. Meanwhile, ICE was out, raiding businesses and arresting people. And so I imagine something very similar could happen here. It's hard to imagine sort of a cover for even more ICE arrests when at this point they're so blatant and out in the open that they're, helicoptering into buildings to raid them and detain people.
Man, the scene from that raid,
the South Shore apartment raid.
Yeah, they've released video footage from their side. Like they turned
it into promotional footage. They
turned it into a short movie in an attempt to recruit people, and again to continue to sell the narrative that they're going after the worst of the worst. When mostly what I'm seeing is video of streetcar vendors and kids crying and grandparents being hauled off. And to your point, I couldn't even tell you how to spot the difference if National Guard show up, but because you couldn't have told me that the agents that were walking through downtown last week or the agents in that video rappelling into South Shore, right? They all look like paramilitary forces.
Yeah, and we talked about this on Friday, and Axios reporter Justin Kaufman made the same point that as far as Chicagoans are concerned, they're already here.
You looking for a new adventure this fall? Consider rock climbing at First Ascent Climate and Fitness. We got a buy one, get 1 day pass for CityCast Chicago listeners, so you can bring a friend or, go and use both for yourself. Even if you ain't never tried climbing, it's actually a little bit easier to get up there than you might think. Across its 4 Chicago locations, First Ascent offers a very supportive environment to help you get started. Plus, the climbs are color-coded, so anybody at any ability level can find a route to seeing. That's a little climbing lingo if you ain't know. It means get to the top of that damn thing. They also got yoga classes and fitness equipment all included with your day pass or membership. Again, CityCast listeners can buy a 1 day pass and get another one of them things for free. Learn more and get your BOGO passes at faclimbing.com/CityCastShot. That's faclimbing.com/CityCastCHI. Shy. Same page? Cool. Fall is in full swing, which means fall theater season is back and cracking across the city, and I got another pick for you to look out for. Don't wait to secure your tickets to Timeline Theater Company's world premiere of Hundreds and Hundreds of Stars. Motherhood, marijuana, and the multiverse collide in this story set in Chicago, exploring family, immigration, and identity.
The play follows Clara, who's applying for U.S. citizenship ahead of a trip to Paris with her tween daughter, but Clara's application is unexpectedly flagged, threatening the only home she's ever known. We got a quote from the playwright and star Sandra Delgado, who says, "This is a very personal family tale, not unlike those playing out more and more every single day in Chicago and around the country." Starting October 8th, this Timeline production is being hosted in the immaculate Looking Glass Theater space in the historic Water Tower Waterworks at Pearson in Michigan. Visit timelinetheater.com for more info and to get your tickets today. If we said it once, we said it 1,000 times. It's spooky season, y'all, but what doesn't have to be so damn scary are your old drafty windows. Not if you replace them with Window Nation. Window Nation offers top quality replacement windows with a lifetime warranty, and if you act now, you can make no payments for 2 years. No, for real, no payments, no monthly payment, no down payment, and no interest until 2027. And if you're looking for high quality, affordable windows for your home, then Window Nation is the place to be. Get started on your free estimate before October 31st to save big on your replacement windows. Get in before Halloween. Head to windownation.com.
Can you remind, like, maybe you can remind people, like, the difference between active military, you know, like Border Patrol agent and National Guard? Was like Border Patrol, that's their job 9 to 5. Active military, right? National Guard, these are some people who just, they got to take off work to come do this work. Like
yeah, well, and the other wild thing is the government is shut down. And so all the prevailing sort of understanding is, right, is they're being asked to do this essentially without pay because these types of military and law enforcement actions are seen as quote unquote essential, which means that the work can still happen, but the federal government doesn't have to pay you if it's shut down. That's kind of how this works, which is why Trump can, you know, fire everybody across these federal offices, you know, furlough, whatever. But these National Guard troops can still be called up. The National Guard is a bit of a unique case because each state controls its own National Guard troops, right? It's essentially a branch of the military that is, you know, that has a state component to it. And as you say, it's not necessarily, for some people, it is a full-time job. It's not necessarily, it depends on the type of troops. And that starts to get like, that's when you start getting into title numbers and like, it starts to get very complicated. But, you know, it's when, for example, Governor Pritzker activated the National Guard in response to protests in 2020, in response to ahead of the verdict of Derek Chauvin in 2021. You know, typically what is happening there is the governor is calling that up in response to something specific in a city like Chicago. But what's happening here is the president is federalizing troops, basically saying, I'm taking over control of these troops because I'm claiming that there is an issue that we're going to send troops in for. And this is against the governor's wishes, the state's wishes, which is also highly unusual. That's what happened in California when they sent National Guard there. It is what is happening in Portland. And then on top of that, in addition to the shooting, right, pretty much immediately in the aftermath, protesters began gathering at the site. And as you say, you know, ICE agents, as we have seen in Broadview, as we have seen in Logan Square, as we've seen across the city, began to respond very violently to those protests. Tear gas, the same thing we have been seeing. And you know, it was interesting in the reports you saw that there initially, you know, Border Patrol called emergency services and asked for support from CPD. And initially CPD was like, do not respond to this call by Border Control for, you know, for assistance with the crowd. CPD then did eventually come out along with Deputy Mayor Garen Gatewood as a deputy mayor of public safety. But as you said, they themselves got tear gassed and were, you know, suffering the effects of that.
I saw the video, them on the sides coughing, trying to gain composure as protesters are pretty much letting them have it. Like, because we've talked about this time and time again, Simone. It's like, regardless of what Chicago and Illinois sanctuary policies say, that officials will not participate directly in helping facilitate or carry out immigration raids. However, when you see state police standing in between protesters with their backs to ICE agents, right, with their batons and in uniform facing protesters in Broadview, when you see the Chicago police eventually standing between ICE agents and protesters, at the end of the day, what it looks like is federal, state, and city officials all sort of mobilized against protesters.
I want to talk about this for a little bit, because I actually really think this is very complex. Because,
for sure.
Because there's a few things going on here. Number one, I think if you ask most protesters, Jacoby, right, they would say, just don't send them at all. Do not send CPD, don't send the Cook County Sheriff, don't send state troopers. Like, you will only make it worse, right? Which I can understand. As you've talked about, our own police forces routinely acting with brutality in their crowd control. However, I think doing nothing presents a problem. I think because then you have mayors, a governor, who are what? Just allowing their civilians, allowing their citizens to be terrorized by federal agents. So what lever do you have if you're a mayor, a governor, what have you? Well, you have police. It's kind of the only official lever you have for the concept of crowd control.
That's my point. That's what we've always been arguing, is this is all we have for everything in Chicago, to deal with the unhoused, to deal with new arrivals, to deal with traffic stops, to deal with mental health calls, to protect us against an occupying, federal force. Like, that's the thing. We don't have anything. Right. And so the only that's the thing.
Not only that, Jacoby, but I think it is even more right. The mechanism we have for crowd control is a police force whose entire purpose is to control the civilian crowd. That is what they are designed to do. And they are designed to do so by controlling their movements, right? Which at worst is kettling, right? In Broadview, we saw those concrete barriers go up. Again, to kind of control where protesters can be in relation to that ICE facility in Broadview. The other mechanism they have is conducting arrests. We saw that in Broadview of, people reporting being arrested by state troopers. I will say, and again, maybe these nuances don't matter, but I do think there's a difference in being arrested by a local police department versus what we have heard about protesters who have been detained by Homeland Security into that black hole of an ICE facility, right? We have heard that it has been very difficult to get information. We know that federal prosecutors are going for really harsh charges. I don't know that that will be the case with local prosecutors. Again, they might against protesters.
That's such a terrible position to find yourself in.
I understand that.
Damn, am I in the custody of the least cruel vestige of the state right now? Because let's be real, Cook County and local PD stations ain't necessarily the most. Now, I'm with you though.
This is where we're at.
And it's the entire time as the mayor and the governor and local officials have sort of spoken out, right? Puffed up their chest. You got to go through me. So Chicago will stand firm. All things you have to say, but then we watch. The governor says you got to go through me. What does that mean when you come out reporting that, they gave me an ultimatum and I ain't nothing I could do about it? Okay. And this is why, we all we got is so very much the mindset, because we're watching the judiciary fail at curtailing this. We're watching local officials, for as admirable and courageous as many of them are, putting their bodies on the front lines. The organizers in Chicago, the Migra Watch, the neighbors. They live on the front lines. And in this moment, to see the sheer ineffectiveness of all of these different vestiges of power, I think continues to instill in protesters and Chicagoans that we are all we got, that we have to continue to show up for each other for conversations like this, show up for each other in these streets, show up with each other, providing resources, right? Continuing to make sure that we both do not normalize this, but we don't use it to kind of create false narratives. For as much violence as we have had to sit through, had to sift through, this is unprecedented. Shout out to Chicago journalists, organizers, community members coming together. One thing I did see in mass over the weekend is I seen videos of people spotting ICE agents, immediately posting it on social media. I saw people with flyers in neighborhoods from the Southwest Side, Brighton Park to Humboldt and Logan, like people walking around with flyers where there was huge ICE presence, people gathering outside of schools and daycares and laundromats where people were being targeted. Simone, what's some other resources and just, ways of moving that people should kind of keep top of mind?
Yeah, I think a phone number you should save is from the Illinois Coalition of Immigrant and Refugee Rights, also known as ICER, the hotline 855-435-7693. Not only can you call that hotline if you need support, if you need to know your rights or, someone has been taken or you're trying to find out information, but also you can report ICE sightings. You can report sightings of federal agents, especially if you have any recordings. But even if you don't have them, that is a place to report them. And they have a network of activists on the ground who work to verify each of those claims. I do think that's an important thing when it comes to, we've been hearing this from the governor, from the, pretty much everybody about recording these if you can on your phone. One thing I do think is key is be careful about sharing immediately to social media. I think on the one hand, social media can be a great tool, right, to disseminate this as quickly as possible. But be sure that be narrating what you're seeing, describe what's going on, timestamps, and to the degree that you can confirm, if you're going to post something on social media, confirm stuff to the degree that you're able. And if you don't know something, make it clear. I know in many ways that sounds like reporting 101, but in this time, we are all reporters. In addition to the ICER hotline, Chicago journalists are also collecting tips. tinyurl.com/Chicago journalists. We'll put this in the show notes as well. That's a spot if you want to send tips to local journalists covering this. That is a place to do it. As far as like more practical stuff, the ACLU, long time, a great spot for at least getting a sense of what your legal rights are and how you should enact those rights. So, for example, they have a guide specifically about knowing your rights if and when the National Guard gets here. It's not just knowing that you have a right to remain silent. It's saying that you should say verbally you're exercising that right. If you do not consent to a search of your vehicle, you may have to allow those officers to search your vehicle, but you should say, do not consent to your search of your vehicle. And the reason you may have to allow officers to do so is so as not to escalate the situation as to put yourself in danger, right? That's the logic there. And you'll see similar sort of advice when it comes to immigration. It's comply with orders, but for the purposes of any future lawsuit or what have you, state what your rights are, and you have the right to tell others what their rights are. I saw this video that Araceli Gomez Aldana did for WBEZ about whether you should be carrying your passport to prove your citizenship if you are stopped by immigration enforcement. And she spoke with folks at the ACLU Illinois, who said, don't carry your passport, your actual passport, because if you lose it or it's taken from you, it will become that much harder to prove your citizenship if you have it. carry a copy of it if you can, as opposed to the thing itself. And it's wild because in that video, she's like, yeah, the spokesperson at ACLU was really wary about giving the advice essentially to carry your papers on you. But if it's a thing that will keep you safer, then it's a thing you should do.
The group Build Tomorrow Chicago also reminds people, if you are documenting things, to go by the salute method, which is size, activity, location, units, time, and equipment, right? How many agents were there? What are they doing? Give an exact address, intersection, or landmark. What letters, detail, or patches are visible or not. What is the date and time? And what did agents have with them, whether that's weapons, dogs, door breakers. Capture as much as you can while you're documenting this. Please check the link in our show notes for all of the resources to read more about the stories we covered today. Please subscribe to our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago. That's where you can find the latest coverage. To our executive producer, Simone Alisea, I appreciate you making time this morning, hopping on the mic with me over the weekend.
Hey, thanks, Jacoby.
Of course, we can't get out of here without at least a little bit of good news. Tonight, please meet me at The Moth at the Den Theater. Tonight's theme is Mass. This is actually my first time ever hosting The Moth at the Den Theater, so I'm very excited. Also, if that theme gives you any inspiration for your own story, you can always pull up, sign up, put your name in the tote bag, get called to come on the stage. And if you win, you're going to compete in the Moth Grand Slam. And if you win that, you compete in the Moth Blood Slam. If that makes you a little bit curious, you got to show up tonight to find out all of the details. Remember, you can also support the show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Chicago neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. You know, a gift from us to you. We got some more tote bags left and we're trying to give them all away. So go ahead and get yours now. We're going to be back bright and early tomorrow. We appreciate you. Stay safe. We'll talk to you then. Peace.